Hello YouTube, Gareth here, moderator from Multi-Tool Forum once again, bringing you another multi-tool review from my collection of various multi-tools and Swiss Army knives. Today we're going to be looking at the Gerber Flik, if you can see the name there. Multi-tool that Gerber brought out a few years ago now, I believe around 2008. And it seems to have been intended at least as a direct competitor to Leatherman's Wave. And we'll have a look at the features and do a little bit of a comparison to find out why I think that's the case. So as with my other videos, I'm going to start off with having a look at the pliers. Like a lot of Gerbers, if not all, this has a sliding head design which Gerber brought out back in the early 90s with their original multiplier. There we go. A flick of the wrist, trying to keep it on camera, so not the easiest thing to do. A flick of the wrist brings the head out into view, or as I'm more wont to do, slide the head up, and there we have the plier head. Now with the flick we have an extra step for good reason, which is we have to then spread the legs open, and if you just have a watch in here where my index finger is, you can see it, one pops out and another pops out, which a little pull, and then when you close the pliers again we have a nice gap. The reason they've tried to do this is because with their older plier design, like I say, their nice old original multiplier, there was no system to form that gap, and if anything slipped out the head you're holding, it had a really good tendency to bite a lump of your skin and give you a nice love bite on the palm of your hand there. A lot of people in our forum call these things affectionately a Mr. Pinchy. With the flick, that's no longer an issue. A nice wide gap for your hand to go in. As a pair of pliers, it's actually quite comfortable. Well, you can see there's lots of furniture on the outside. Actually, all the backs of these things are nicely rounded, so there's no sharp edges that are digging into your hand. Multi-tool is always going to be compromised. They're never as comfortable as an actual set of pliers, or very rarely are. But this one I find quite perfectly acceptably comfortable to use in your hand, even with squeezing down tight. The plier head itself is basically very similar to most multi-tools, which is a hybrid, not quite a pair of pliers, not quite a pair of needle nose pliers, but a semi needle nose design. Often with this cutout regular pliers, as they like to call them in the literature, as well as a needle nose. What's slightly different about this compared to a lot of multi-tools plier heads is that the cutters are offset. So you can see we've got a nice big gap on this side, and the actual cutting edges are on one face. Most multi-tools you'll find that the cutters are in line in the center, so sitting just where the hinge is here, and the cutters are bypass style. These ones are offset. Offset cutters have the advantage that if you're trying to work close to so trying to trim something very near a surface, you can actually get a cut right beside the surface. Whereas with an bypass style, you'll always have at least a small stub left that you have to then deal with. As a set of cutters, they're okay. They're anvil style cutters as they're known, and the two faces come together but do not bypass each other, which doesn't make for the cleanest of cuts necessarily, but it's a perfectly acceptable set. Enough about the pliers. The flick has a nice idea in that all the tools are accessible from the outside. We'll take a random one here. Here we are. So I've found the serrated edge. Now, if I have a wee look here, trying to bring this in and keep it in focus, Gerber actually provide nice little pictures on the outside that tell us which tools are sitting underneath, so I can actually see without opening up that this is in fact a serrated edge knife. I'm not a wild fan of serrated edge knives. I don't find that they're that useful in day-to-day life. However, if you're going to have one, this is one I actually quite like. Blunt tipped, regular serrations, not too aggressive. I find aggressive serrations tend to just snag rather than actually cut. This one I'm a big fan of actually. As far as serrated knives go, personally I'd rather just not have one, I'd have something else instead, but I can talk about that later. Turning the tool over, I also have a set of scissors, which, as you can see, I can open with one hand. Nice long set of blades on this, nice thumb pad, nice and comfortable, spring return, actually a really good set of scissors. Given that Fiskars are the parent company of Gerber, and Fiskars are well known for scissors amongst many other things, it's hardly surprised that Gerber tend to put out a pretty good set of scissors. Like those ones. Coming back to the side, what we've got, we have wood saw. This is where I start having some issues with the Flik. The wood saw is not the best one. It's not very sharp, it's quite small teeth. It cuts, and it cuts okay, but there are other saws in the market, notably from Leatherman, Victorinox, which cut much faster. This gives you a nice fine edge, a fine finish on the wood surface you've been cutting, but that's not necessarily what you want. You tend to want it to go through the wood quite quickly. Not their biggest success, this saw. However, it does have a nice sharp tip. And what this does work very well as is for gyprock, drywall, I believe the Americans call it. And it's a really pretty good gyprock plasterboard drywall saw. You can stab through the gyprock and form nice cutouts for whatever you might be needing it for, making electrical sockets, that kind of thing. So for that purpose, it's okay. But as a wood saw, I'm a little disappointed. It's quite slow to get through things. Well, wrong one. See, I should be looking at the pictures. Okay, here we go. The plain edge knife. A slightly unusual design, completely straight edge, no curve to this whatsoever, and a drop down to form a tip. Disadvantage of this is this tip, and I'll see if I can get this into focus, this tip is snapped off. Very slightly, not a lot, but just ever so slightly, because this angle of where this line meets this line was really, really fine, we get a very, very delicate tip. And even being careful, I've still managed to chip the end of that blade off. Advantages, however, are that this is a really easy knife to sharpen. No turning it on curved surfaces, no trying to wind this around, certainly not recurved in any way. So this makes it so if you put it on a bench stone, you can just nicely glide the knife backwards and forwards on both sides and form a really nice regular edge. All the outside tools use Gerber safety lock system, which is simply you pull back to let this come in. Not the easiest knives to one hand open. Obviously it's possible, but there are other ones, because these slots are rather small, getting a good grip on that isn't as easy as some. But I've always managed to do it. I don't think I've ever tried with gloves on, but I think I would probably struggle. Okay, so we've got the long tools, we've got the plier head, we also have some short tools, and we'll get to that in a moment. These are, you can see in the middle, a couple of implements on each side, well hidden back here. And if you're simply to try and get your fingernail into that, you can, but it's really hard to access. The good feature is that if you pull back in the safety lock, those little tools lift out, and suddenly grabbing them is an awful lot easier. Okay, so what do we have? We have small screwdriver, larger screwdriver with cap lifter. Now, one of the big criticisms that every Gerber, because of the nature of the sliding head design, tend to come in for is that the length of these tools are short, and there is no denying it. These are definitely short screwdrivers. Good news is that they are quite well formed, nice and grippy. Take a bite on the screw, I have no problem with that. Also, unlike a lot of multi-tools, the screwdriver is very near the central axis of the multi-tool itself. So rather than being offset to the outside, these are offset to the middle. And that means that when you turn your screw, the multi-tool is as close as you can physically get to it, of being in the central line, So the body of the multi-tool is turning in a nice circle. If we have a look at another multi-tool, the Wave, what tends to happen is that the multi-tool, you can see, forms quite a large circle around the pivot point that is the screw. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but this design means that that turns much more easily in my hand, much more naturally anyway, which is a bonus in my head. Addressing the length of the screwdriver, and I'm going to bring this out to the Wave, we hold these side by side, you can obviously see that this compared to this means that the screwdriver is a good few millimeters shorter. I don't deny it. However, the working length of these screwdrivers, if you're worried about gaining recessed screws, on the Wave, it's not as long as you think it is. Because the carrier is quite a broad, bulky piece, if we actually take this and hold these side by side, or as much as I can, you can see that the working length of this is from here to here, and the working length of this is from here to here, and that's not particularly different. In fact, they're pretty much nigh on identical. So whilst these appear really short, the Wave, which is an incredibly popular and justifiably popular multi-tool, hasn't got much longer working screwdriver when using this bit kit. So whilst I can see the argument about these being short, and I totally get it, they're not actually as bad as you might think. Okay, so what we've got, like I said, we've got a couple of flat screwdrivers here. One small, really good for electrical type connectors. One larger with a cutout for use as a cap lifter, a bottle opener. All good so far. We have, on the other side, a can opener. Well, it calls itself a can opener. I've tried it as a can opener, and I actually can't open a can of beans with it. It's diabolically bad. It's the worst can opener I've ever tried to use on a multi-tool or of any description. It simply would not let me eat anything, which is a definite disadvantage when it calls itself a can opener. I suppose the good news is that because, again, this is in line and it's got a nice straight point, this actually works quite well as an impromptu awl for making starts in woodwork, etc. I wouldn't try burrowing too deep with it, but as something to just break the surface and give you a screw, something to bite into, it actually works quite well. And also because this can opener edge is quite fine, it actually works quite well as a good prying and lifting tool, just to get cover caps, that kind of thing, out the way. So as far as that's concerned, it's still a useful tool, but not if you want to eat a can of beans. Okay. Last, we have the Phillips screwdriver. Now, I'm going to see if I can get this up and close and in focus. Here we can see that it is a flat. It should not look like this. I had to regrind this Phillips because when it arrived, it did not fit any screws. What this should look like, and I'm going to bring in a previously reviewed multi-tool here, and my recoil, it should look like this, where it's got an extra couple of flanges. But when I got my Flik, this width here, I'm trying to obscure it, this width here was much too fat. It had been improperly ground. Now I'm happy to say that I've had a look at other people's Fliks since, and that doesn't seem to be a common problem. That seems to have been a problem with my multi-tool and the way it was ground. And if you were to find one where it was simply would not fit in a Phillips head screw, don't do what I did, which was to grind it flat. You should send it back to Gerber. They shouldn't be like that. It was a factory error, mine. Disappointing that there was any factory error on it. But what I had to do was, I felt what I had to do was grind mine back and take it back to and thin this out to a point where it actually now fits in a Phillips. However, I've lost those two flanges. As I've said in other reviews, the 2D Phillips are usable, if not fantastic. Certainly good enough for tightening and loosening a few screws here and there. Okay. Like I say, it seems to me that this was very much intended to be a competitor to Leatherman's Wave, and you can see that they are are roughly the same size, the wave being very slightly shorter than the Flik. But overall, the same kind of size, the same kind of shape, with 4 outside opening tools and a selection of interior ones. What I personally think Gerber missed a trick on is the not including a file. A file is a tool and a multi-tool that I use a lot of, and I wish that this one had it. This was my work caddy, my job as a maintenance engineer for months, and I really like it. But so many times I wish it had a file on it. The screwdrivers, I didn't find such an issue as people would seem to assume. I think they worked okay. The knives are perfectly fine. The saw, like I say, not great for wood, but perfectly good for cutting gyprock, drywall. The pliers, I found a good design. Overall, a very worthy multi-tool. However, it's not perfect. But hey ho, no multi-tool is. They all have compromises, and this one's no exception. So you get short screwdrivers because of the sliding head, and you miss out on a file, which, like I say, I think Gerber missed the trick on. Anyway, try and keep this as brief as possible, so I'm going to sign off here. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please subscribe to the rest of my channel, have a look at my other videos, and click the like button. Thanks very much, folks. Talk to you again. Bye bye.